2 of the Acts of 2023 on March 29th, 2023, Governor Maura Healey signed into law an act making appropriations for the fiscal year 2023 to provide for supplementing certain existing appropriations and for certain other activities and projects. This act includes an extension until March 31st, 2025 of the remote meeting provisions. This April 26, 2023 Select Board meeting is going to be conducted by remote participation from the board, and I'd like to go ahead and give Westwood Media Center permission to record the meeting. And I will ask, is there anyone else in attendance looking to record the meeting? All right, seeing none, I'm going to jump into the chair's update. The Westwood High robotics team qualified for the Robotic World Championship for the first time in its 18-year history. The competition was held from April 19th to April 22nd in Houston, Texas, and featured international and American teams. The robotics team is comprised of 20 Westwood High School aged members and 4 adults. Congratulations to the Westwood High robotics team for their success and tremendous achievement, everybody. Congratulations to you all. Next up is the annual town meeting, which was going to be held on Monday, May 1st at Westwood High School in the auditorium. The town meeting warrant consists of 20 total articles, 13 budget articles, 2 select board articles, and 5 planning board articles. We will begin registration in the auditorium lobby at 5:30. We will have recognitions and swearing in of elected officials that will begin at 6 p.m. And we will also present the 2023 John J. Cronin Public Service Award. Official town meeting business will start at 6:30 in the Westwood High School auditorium. Tonight, the board will be discussing a quorum reduction for the 2023 annual town meeting per the Commonwealth's Chapter 2, Acts of 2023. A reduction in the quorum is the minimum number of registered voters required to attend and vote on town business, but by no means limits the number of attendees. We encourage all registered voters to attend the annual town meeting on May 1st, 2023, and to have their voices heard and participate in the important decisions that govern the town. And then finally, before we get into some scheduled action, yesterday was the election, and I just want to say a few things about our colleague, Michael Walsh, who has served the town so well over these past 9 years. Michael, can't thank you enough for all that you have given to the community. Some of the highlights include, the leadership that you provided with respect to getting Islington to where it is, and, the fantastic result that came out of that. The redevelopment down there, sort of getting that bridge work done, working on the school building committee with respect to Haniel and Deerfield during the MSBA process, all of that and so much other that you've done with respect to aiding our seniors, the Meals on Wheels, serving on the aid to the elderly and infirmed, obviously your work on the John J. Cronin Public Service Award. And so I can't thank you enough on behalf of, myself, our colleagues past, and I will give Marianne an opportunity to say some words now as well.
Well, thank you, Rob. Mike, I want to echo everything that Rob said and to thank you for your long and distinguished service to the town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, on scheduled action tonight, we have to approve the sale of a $1.225 million bond anticipation note as recommended by the town treasurer. Tish, do I see is
Yep, Phil is on, as is
on.
Foley.
Okay, good. I see them just coming in now. Great. So we have both Phil Shapiro, our town treasurer, and Kathy Foley, assistant town treasurer. I just want to give a little background. We sold a short-term one-year band on April 11th, and this provides funding for projects approved at the prior town meeting last May, but where we have not yet issued long-term debt. So the band will provide funding for the Conant Road culvert improvements, which were $200,000 approved at the May meeting last year. The cemetery expansion design work, which is $125,000, also approved at last year's town meeting. And the Canton Street sidewalk design, which is $900,000, also approved at last year's meeting. Phil or Kathy, I don't know which of you would like to take the lead on taking us through this.
I'll start. But Kathy did all the work, so I want to thank Kathy and Stephanie, and they worked with the financial advisor and bond counsel, and it was certainly a successful note issue. I also want to echo everyone's slight aside here, if I can, to thank Mike Walsh for his great service to the town over a long period of time. As many of you know, as you all know, this is not easy stuff to do. It takes a lot of time and effort, and Mike Walsh has done it very, very well. And I want to thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Phil.
As you know, the bond interest rates have gone up since the last time we issued debt. This is a very small transaction. It's only for 1 year. So the rate was still very low, 3.08%. And our hope is that when this gets rolled over next year, if we will make a decision whether to do it long-term, well, my successor as treasurer, Stephanie, will make a decision whether to do it long-term or not. But we could roll it over for 1 more year, or we could take it out as a longer term issue, and that'll depend on what else is needs to be done, and what the level of short and long term interest rates are. So we had 4 bidders. Fidelity Capital Markets were the lowest interest rate bidder, and working with bond counsel, Kathy and Stephanie will be finishing this up so that all the documents are taken care of by April 27th, and the town will receive the funding. So it was on the surface very simple, but all the work still has to be done, and Kathy does a great job at that, and she's a pleasure to work with. So I really do appreciate Kathy and Stephanie's work on this, and the town can start these projects.
Outstanding. Kathy, Stephanie, either of you have anything to add to what Phil has had to say?
Thank you, Phil. I really appreciate that. And thanks for all your assistance through the process, especially it being my first time borrowing with the town. So I appreciate all your help. And Kathy. Kathy was a huge instrument getting this through. I do just want to add one note. So tomorrow is the deadline for signing the paperwork. It is included in the packet, it's the whole language, if you want to go through all of it. So the closing documents just need to actually be signed by tomorrow at noon. So anyone who would like to reach out to Kathy and I, when we're available tomorrow morning as early as 8 a.m. If you could come by and just get that signed, that would be great. So thank you.
Okay, questions from either of my colleagues?
No.
All right.
No, I'm all set.
Okay, I would entertain a motion.
So I move that the select board vote to approval of a 1 year, $1,225,000 ban as recommended by the town treasurer to adopt the vote prepared by bond counsel in connection with the sale of the town's April 2023 bond application notes. In addition, to have all the select board members sign the closing documents anytime on or before April 27th, 2023.
I second that.
Yeah, just bond anticipation notes, right? Yes. Okay. So roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings.
Aye.
Mr. Walsh.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well.
And I would personally like to thank, of course, Kathy, who's I've had the pleasure in my 9 years of reading every single one of these into the record. So thank you very much, Kathy. And here we go. I, the clerk of the select board of the town of Westwood, Massachusetts, known as the town, certified that a meeting was held of the board on April 26, 2023, of which meeting all members of the board were duly notified, at which a quorum was present. The following notes were unanimously passed, all of which appear on the official record of the board in my custody. Voted to approve the sale of the 1,225,000 4% general obligation bond anticipation notes, known as the notes, of the town dated May 2nd, 2023, and payable May 2nd, 2024, to Fidelity Capital Markets, a division of National Financial Services LLC, at par and accrued interest, if any, plus a premium of $11,223.25.
I'm so sorry. I don't mean to cut in. I'm hoping this will be helpful. Kathy, can you confirm the whole vote does not need to be read?
That's true. Bond counsel has indicated that.
Okay,
If that
excellent.
helps at all, Mike, I hope that
That's
does.
great.
So it'll
Michael?
just be,
If I may, this represents a change in advice from bond counsel.
Okay, so we don't
We
have
have
to read it into
historically
the
had
record.
to we have historically had to read the whole thing into the record, and bond counsel tells us we no longer have to do that.
Excellent. That's the best news I've had all day.
so the note is.
Actually, the
it's
best
just
news in
the-
2 days.
So it would just be to make the motion to adopt the vote prepared by bond counsel in connection with the sale of the town's April bond anticipation note.
Okay, so moved.
And seconded.
Roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Okay. Next, we will be going into executive session to discuss one issue pursuant to General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 221A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining for union personnel. Specifically, the Westwood Police Association, Massachusetts Coalition of Police, AFL-CIO Local 174. Discussion of which would have a detrimental effect on the position of the governing body if the discussion were held in open session. The board will return to open session, and we anticipate doing that by about 6:30, give or take.
I move that we go into executive session for the one aforementioned reason.
Second.
Roll call vote. Ms. Lamont Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. I will see you in executive session. We'll be back in a few minutes, folks. open session and our beginning new business. And first up, we have a police association, Westwood Police Association Coalition of Police, AFL-CIO, Local 174 Memorandum of Agreements. And Chris, would you like to let Molly take the lead on this?
Yes, I would.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Here before you are two MOAs for the Police Association. The current contract with the police union expired on June 30th, 2022. So the two agreements, one is for a 1-year deal for FY23. The second is for a 3-year deal for FY24, 25, and 26. The town's team and the union's team met a number of times over the winter and the spring of 2023 and have come to this agreement. Some of the highlights include eliminating the compounding of administrative and comp days, increasing the education incentive, increasing the vacation accrual schedule, incorporation of random drug testing for all employees who were hired after July 1st, 2009, and the incorporation of a new mental health day program. In terms of economics, the FY23 MOA is for a flat 2.5%, which is the same that all other units got for FY23. 24 and 25 are a little complicated. Service steps are receiving a 2.5% base wage adjustment, and the quote unquote regular steps are receiving a 1.25% base wage adjustment. And the reasoning for that is because the officers who are getting an increase in education incentive are on those regular steps. And so while they're getting a lower base wage adjustment, they're getting an increase in their education incentive. And then in FY26, we've revamped the wage table for police, bringing the number of steps from 12 to 9 and ultimately 8, which is much more in line with police departments in our area, and makes us a lot more favorable in terms of recruiting other officers. So this is a 2-year deal. The police union voted to ratify this agreement on April 14th, and I'm hoping you'll do the same. And I know Chief Silva is here. Chief, if you have anything that I left out.
Thank you. I don't think you did. I just would echo and expand on the fact that we have very productive meetings with Chris, Molly, myself, and the members of the bargaining unit for the police department. It's an incredibly challenging time right now for recruitment and retention. You're seeing officers much more mobile, transferring from department to department than you've ever seen before. We have lost some officers before, so being able to be competitive in the job market is critical for us. The town spends a lot of money training our officers and hiring our officers. And, you know, we have a terrific staff of police officers, frankly. I'm the president of Metrolec, which is the Metropolitan Boston Law Enforcement Council. That's the 44 or 45 now, I think we're growing, cities and towns in and around the greater Boston area. And so I have these conversations monthly with different chiefs. I have a lot of exposure to different police officers all throughout the greater Boston area. And our staff is exceptional. Our crime rates are incredibly low. Our complaints against officer conduct are almost non-existent. When they do come in, they're usually more of a communication misunderstanding, and they're in the neighborhood of 1 to 2 per year. We had 40,000 logged interactions with the public last year. We know the police officers don't call in everything they do. So I'm very proud of the staff, very proud of our numbers. And I just wanted to make the board aware of that. So I appreciate everybody's hard work on both sides of the table and the support of the board.
And Chief, you feel like this is going to give you all the tools that you need to be competitive and continue to recruit and retain as many of these outstanding officers as we have?
I think so. It really it puts us, I would say, largely in equipoise with the more competitive police departments. You know, we're not at the very top, but you know, that's a never-ending chase, right? You could be at the top today, and somebody settles a contract tomorrow. But we're certainly in the ballpark. And when you look at the whole compensation, not the least of which is a great group of residents that we have to work for, and a very supportive environment in the town across all the departments. That's tangible. It's hard to put a dollar value on that, but that's real. Westwood's a great place to work. We have a great group of officers, so I think that's a great marriage.
Chris, anything to add?
I really just want to echo what the chief said regarding the team. Molly was fabulous in the leadership during the negotiations, but you know the union bargaining team advocated for their members as they're supposed to. That's their role. But they also understood the sustainable budget process that the town has, and the town has been very successful at. And they worked with us to work within that model. I also want to thank Stephanie for making sure the costing out was also within our sustainable budget, and Chief Silva. I think it's crucial to have the chief in the room during the negotiations, because I think that leads to a lot of clearing up. So I don't know all the police protocol. I don't know all the police lingo. So it's helpful when the chief is able to put those in layman's terms. But it's also helpful where we are caucusing, where the chief is advocating for certain things that maybe the union is proposing or we haven't thought of. And I think one of the things is that mental health day. I think that's really something that Molly and I are going to be looking at for other groups as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Molly, Stephanie, Chris, Chief, for your leadership and collaboration on this. And I'll turn it to Michael or Mary Ann. Do either of you have any questions with respect to the agreements before us?
No questions. I'll just echo your thanks to everyone on the team. Thank you.
No, I'm all set.
All right. I would then entertain a motion.
I move the select board vote to sign the 2 memorandums of agreements between the town of Westwood and the Westwood Police Association, Massachusetts Coalition of Police, AFL-CIO Local 174.
I second that.
Excellent. Roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings.
Aye.
Mr. Walsh.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. This is great to have settled, and thank you all for your leadership, and appreciate the great job you did there, Molly. Okay. Next up, we have some proposed changes to traffic rules and orders for valet parking spaces, and penalties and repeals. By way of background, in 1995 and again in 2016, the select board reviewed and made amendments to traffic rules and orders, which updated all the laws to be current with state laws and regulations. At that time, the board updated and amended our appendices A through D and schedule listings, which have been subsequently amended throughout the years to add location of stop signs, no parking and one-way street signs, vehicle restrictions, and other traffic rules. So these restrictions can be enforced. Subsequent amendments were approved by the select board in 2020 and 2022. So, Chris, do you have someone who wants to take us through? Is this chief going to take us through this, or?
I think we can. I know Tish worked a lot on this with the chief, but we can have the chief or Tish. Chief, you want to just walk through from the enforcement standpoint the recommendations for the change to the traffic rules?
Sure. So yeah, I wasn't able to be at the board meeting when this happened the last time, but certainly had a lot of conversation behind the scene. I think it's a wonderful thing in terms of being supportive of the businesses and also giving traffic the opportunity to get in and out of the business and to have a safe place to park. So it was a great idea that we were, full supportive from the police department. Applaud the board for doing that. But once we saw it, because we have not had any valet parking type situations, like a lot of new things, you realize there are some unanticipated consequences. And so one of those was how we were going to enforce the valet parking. If someone, for example, came to another business a short time before the valet parking started, and then they went somewhere else, they would have no real notice that it was valet parking, and then we wouldn't have any real ability to do ticketing or towing if it came to that. And there was some talk about a bifurcated time limit between the two spaces. One would start at 4 and one would start at 6. And we thought that might be somewhat complicated. So Tish and I worked together. I worked with Chris and town council. And my recommendation would be that, and I think, frankly, we need to have notice. Legally, we need to have put the residents or visitors or anyone coming to the area, put them on notice with signage that those spots are for valet parking during certain time periods. and certain days of the week. And so that it's not confusing to them, and there's no confusion with enforcement, that both spots start at the same time. I know there was some conversation about starting at 4 p.m. for one and then 6 p.m. for the other. For us, the start time really doesn't matter. It would be up to the pleasure of the board. If the board thinks that it's appropriate to have the parking start at 4, then both spots could start at 4 and that'd be okay. Conversely, if the board thinks that they want that to start at 6, starting at 6 would be okay as well, as long as there was signage, so people would be put on notice, and then the officers would have the ability to do enforcement based on the appropriate notice.
Okay, and by way of background for everybody, back on March 13th, we had approved a trial basis from 6 p.m. to 12 a.m. for the 2 spots out front of Neroli. But then we amended that because they were really looking to start at 4 p.m. and that created some conflict with existing signage, right, Chief?
Yes.
Yeah. So I know Mike is here. Mike, Tish, if you'd let him in, I just want to hear if there's any issue with us being consistent with a 6 p.m. start time on that.
He's coming in right now.
Sounds good.
There he is.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
Good. How's it going?
Good. So you were in attendance. You heard sort of the back and forth, and I know we've probably communicated with you as well. I would imagine the 4 to 6 time frame would be a very light time frame for you anyway, with respect to any valet usage. I can see it being, quite busy beginning at 6. Given where we are, I think we're inclined to move to a 6 o'clock start time. Any comments that you want to put before us before we vote?
I just think that the 4 o'clock start time only helps with the elderly. They do tend to come a little earlier. They're actually, at the end of the day, sure, I'd love to start at 6 and save a couple dollars, but I believe that the 4 o'clock start time only helps certain people that actually need it. Older ladies walking across from CVS over to here, or potentially Morrison Park from over to here. I'd prefer to start it at 4. I haven't seen a lot of real trouble with other businesses in the area. They really tend to slow down on the weekends. That's just my personal opinion, but whatever the board feels, I can start at 6. It won't be a big deal. I just think that the elderly do appreciate it because they tend to come a little earlier for dinner, to be able to get right out of their cars and come in without having to really walk around. And particularly behind the business, there is a set of stairs that some of them find a little difficult to come up, but I live at the pleasure of the board. What everyone thinks, I'm happy to do.
If I could ask, Mike, could you give us a sense as to what kind of usage you've had of the valet service between 4 and 6?
It's a great question, actually. I just started 2 weeks ago getting the how many cars are actually getting valeted each night. I'm averaging around 30 to 35, so it's not getting a ton of usage. But again, I think it's people are noticing it more and more as they come, right? I think it's a little harder as we've been scarce to touch spots with some of the signage. And especially after our initial discussion, I think just a couple of weeks ago, I really backed off like any real signage for it. So I don't really know the potential of what that could become, but I definitely started taking note, and I'm averaging about 30, 35 cars on the weekends.
Thank you.
Michael, questions for you?
No, I happen to agree with Mike. I mean, because you've been involved so much with the Council on Aging, I think Mike is not there yet, but at some point he's going to be offering an early bird special, I'm sure. And I know that for my own mom and my mother-in-law, that that was kind of essential for them to not have to walk so far. So I'm inclined to go with the 4 o'clock, just to give you a tip as to which direction I'm thinking. But I'm only one of 3.
Right.
Well, I agree with Michael on that. I mean, we talked about this originally, about this is about access for folks who need it. And as Mike said, the elderly, our seniors in town are probably more likely to dine there earlier rather than later. So I think there may be a compelling need to offer it at that earlier time.
Chris, Chief, anything that you would want to add to the discussion before we consider a vote?
For me, it's, again, it makes no difference to us if it's 4 o'clock or 6 o'clock. We don't receive, and we have not received any complaints about parking generally, other than, when the business first opened and there was some confusion, but nothing like people calling to complain that they can't get parking or they have to cross the street and run across the street. So we have no concerns or any data to say that a 6 o'clock is better than a 4 o'clock or vice versa. So certainly up to the board, we can work with either. It's just that whatever it is, if it would be consistent, I think makes the most sense for the public. So you don't have 2 spots adjacent to one another with 2 different times and 2 different signs. And it's best for enforcement as well.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, my opinion is we're really talking about one space, because the board previously voted to allow one space to be valet beginning at 4 p.m. So we're really just talking about taking that second space and moving it from 6 to 4. And I do think that there have been some compelling comments made here why the 4 p.m. would be better option for many residents and many visitors of the restaurant.
Okay, and I understand there's also just a little bit of cleanup language around penalties. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, if
Could I
there
just
are,
ask? Could I just
Yeah.
ask one question? So I understand that the chief's interest here is having a sign that can lead to enforcement. So it's very clear. But the board's decision from a month or so ago also allowed for valet parking in some instances for special occasions that would not be on Friday and Saturday nights. So if you have a sign up there that says this area is restricted for valet parking Fridays and Saturdays between 6 p.m. and midnight, how would we treat those other special occasions? Would there be a temporary sign that could be added?
Chief,
Yeah,
you want to
could
take that one?
We'll probably put out a sandwich board, Nora.
Yeah. So we had some conversation about that, and my recommendation would be on the permanent signs to have the days and the time, and then put unless otherwise noted. And on those instances when the board approved and otherwise noted, to Michael's point, just put a visible sign or some other type of signage, or they could there's a number of ways they could address that, but I think as long as you indicate to people that it can be otherwise noted and give people notice is the big deal, right? So as long as you give people notice, for our purposes, it's okay, because then we can enforce it. Otherwise, we can't really enforce it.
Thank you. So I imagine the best thing to do would then be to put a sign up at least a couple of hours earlier than those special occasions would occur.
I can do
Right.
that.
okay. All right, then given that, I would entertain a motion. I believe there are 2 motions before us.
Yeah, Rob, did you want to talk about the penalties first, just so we can put it public? I know it's in our notes, but just tell them we're adding 2.
That sounds good. Chris, I know, or Nora, who wants to take the lead here with respect to the 2 additional or revised and additional fines?
So I'm happy to read it and we can certainly discuss it. The 2 additional recommendations for fines is a $100 fine for parking safety / fire lane violation, which is being revised. And the new one is a $50 fine for valet parking violations. And that's
Question.
again, as far as the enforcement goes, when the police department does need to enforce, they would have the authority to issue fines. All the fines that are listed in the traffic rules and regulations, but those 2 are the new, one is revised and one is new.
Okay. Questions from either of my colleagues with respect to the two fines, the revision and the additional fine for valet parking violations?
I just had one. I'm okay with the fire lane violation, but what is parking safety? Just so, I don't know, can someone define what the parking safety is? Because it says parking safety / fire lane violations. I understand the fire lane violation. What is the parking safety?
As I understand it, it's either any type of a public safety lane or area as designated or as to be designated in the future. You see sometimes with businesses, we have a lot of more medical facilities coming up into town, and we're dealing with a lot more mental health and other related issues. And so there could be areas that'll be designated, for public safety purpose. That's really generically, as I understand it, and what's contemplated to try to, foresee that. There are a number of other examples that could fit into that. You could have fire engines or police cars or somewhere at a scene, and somebody just, parked in an otherwise parking space, and somebody gets frustrated and just pulls up, not in a space, and, it could address that issue as well.
Okay.
I actually do have a question, if I may. So what if someone wants to drop off someone and not actually have the car valeted, but somebody has an issue, they want to be dropped off up front? Is that okay under this to do that?
Can I answer a little bit of that not on the legal side, but people have been doing that actually just to save a little money. But I mean, again, it's free, right? So I'm pretty open about it. I'm not really enforcing it too much. I'm not trying to be a nuisance to the area. So people are using it. I'd prefer that they drop off, and a lot of the elderly do get dropped off kind of in like a little like van almost sometimes. So I'm happy to have them do it. I mean, it's kind of why we're carving it out personally, but again, not to discuss any fines or anything, which would be totally on the chief side.
Okay. Any further questions?
Nora, I just had one. Do we have parking safety defined? I'm using my lawyer hat here. Do we have parking safety defined somewhere? Because I can see if I got ticketed for parking safety, I'd say, well, what defines parking safety? So do we have actual language anywhere in our regulations as to what that means?
It would have to be in the rules, police rules and orders, traffic rules and orders, and I don't see it now.
Okay.
But perhaps the chief could add that.
Yeah, like I said, I'm just using my lawyer hat, chief. I would be able to probably beat you on that one, saying, wait a minute, what's public safety, parking safety defined as?
Right. No, I hear you. It's a good point. I guess if I put my lawyer hat on too, I would say if we're going to create a public safety lane, then we wouldn't have to recreate the fine at that time. So we wouldn't enforce it until the lane was created. But your point is well taken, and that's correct. But if we don't have a delineated zone defined as is, we wouldn't cite that. We would cite fire lane, right? We wouldn't cite a parking ticket for a lane that doesn't yet exist.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, Rob, you ready for motions?
Absolutely.
Okay. I move the select board approve the following two motions. First, to amend the March 13th, 2023 select board decision for the following: to designate 2 valet parking spaces on Washington Street in front of the Neroli restaurant for the valet drop-off/pickup parking spaces on Friday and Saturday evenings from 4 p.m. Well, I guess it was 6 p.m., but 4 p.m. On a trial basis. Any use of the valet parking spaces for special events outside Friday or Saturday would require at least 2 weeks advance notice, and for the request to be reviewed by the town administrator and the Westwood Police. Also, proper signage must be used by the establishment delineating the designated valet parking spaces, and the sign must include violators are subject to tow and fine. And second, to amend the traffic rules and orders for the following actions for the town: to publish the 2 amendments on the town's website, to add under section 1-32 valet parking under article 1 definitions and include the following language: a service provided by a commercial entity that will take care, custody, and control of a motor vehicle for the purposes of parking in said vehicle and retrieving said vehicle when the parking service is no longer needed. The service is set for a period of time as defined by the select. And B, add subsection schedule number 1A, limited no parking, to schedule number 1 for approved valet parking spaces along Washington Street. And C, amend Article 12, penalties and repeals, section 12-1 penalties, and to add valet parking violations for a fine of $50 and to increase the parking safety/fire lane violations from $50 to $100.
Before
I
you
second
second
that.
that, Mary Ann, I would just, Nora and Pat would ask, do we need to include the additional language on the sign that Chief noted as unless otherwise noted? Should we include that in the motion as well?
I'm a little confused with your question. I'm sorry.
So it says, also proper signage must be used by the establishment delineating the valet parking spaces, and the sign must include, and then it has quotes, violators are subject to tow and fine. So we are approving, the language of the sign. So I think, Chief had suggested, the hours will be on the sign, and then it would say beneath that, before this, violators are subject to tow and fine unless otherwise noted.
If you want it on the sign, you should include it in the motion.
So it would be
Okay.
included in the motion after the hours 4 PM to midnight that Michael read.
Correct.
Okay. So I will amend my motion as discussed.
And I second it.
Okay, roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you.
Mike.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we move to old business, and we are continuing our discussion regarding the quorum reduction. So as we had talked about last time, reduction in quorum is the minimum number of registered voters required to attend and vote on town business. By no means does that limit the number of attendees, as all registered voters are encouraged to attend. Per the Commonwealth's Chapter 22 and Acts of 2022, towns are allowed to reduce their town meeting quorum. The current quorum per the town charter is 175 registered voters. And we talked about reducing that. And so I think we had talked about reducing that to 45. I believe town moderator is in attendance as well. And Chris, I don't know if you want to take us through anything, or if you want to hand that over to Jim to provide a perspective.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Just as a quick overview, the town has reduced the quorum once during COVID, when town council had to get an injunction against ourselves through the courts in order to bring that number down, which was to 45. And at the last annual town meeting, we also had a reduction in the quorum down to 45. I would just like to turn it over first to town council, just to go over a little of particulars, and we can certainly then turn it over to the town moderator, if that's okay.
So Mr. Coleman is absolutely correct. We have reduced the quorum twice. And we did it the first time through a court order, through an injunction against ourselves. And then we utilized the provision of Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022 to reduce it last year. It is a floor, not a ceiling. We've made our quorum every time we've had to have town meeting, but it's also an insurance that if people become disinterested in town meeting and start walking out, we don't lose the ability to continue the town business. And I'm happy to answer any other questions. This act was extended by the Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023 a few weeks ago. And so it requires the moderator's approval and participate in the discussion.
Mr. Moderator, would you like to weigh in?
I have nothing further to add than the prior decision, Mr. Chair. I think it's a good decision, but if the board would indulge me, I'd like to thank Mr. Walsh for his 9 years of service on the select board. He was a big help to me back in 2014 when we both ran first time for town offices. He was elected, but he was a big help to me. And also as a member of the Council on Aging, I'd like to thank him for his service to the seniors of this town.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Any questions from either of my colleagues with respect to the quorum reduction?
No, I think it's pretty clear. So I move the select board in consultation with the town moderator vote to reduce the 2023 annual town meeting quorum from 175 registered voters down to 45 registered voters, and for the town clerk to notify the Attorney General of the adjusted quorum requirement.
I second that.
Okay, roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, and I hope to see everybody on Monday. Hope we have a nice big turnout.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I indulge the meeting for a moment?
You may.
So I too would like to congratulate Michael Walsh on his service to the town. I am privileged to say that I worked as a colleague with Mr. Walsh when he first got on the board, and have been fortunate to work with him in this role. And they're two different roles, but I enjoyed working with him in both roles. And I think the town is better off for his service. And I wish him well and Godspeed. It's been fun, Michael, and I wish you nothing but the best for you and your family.
Thank you, Pat. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, I believe the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from April 3rd. Did anyone have any changes for those minutes?
No.
I did not.
All right, I would entertain a motion.
So I move that we approve the select board regular meeting minutes from April 3rd, 2023 as written.
I second that.
Okay, roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Is there any other business that has come before us? Chris, Tish?
Mr. Chair, I just have one thing, if I could.
Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Walsh, on behalf of all the town employees, present and past, we want to thank you for your service. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your leadership. It has certainly been a pleasure working with you. And again, thank you for your leadership and thank you for your support throughout the years.
Thank you, Chris. I can't really say anything because it's too early on in the stage. I won't make it through without some tears. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Chairman Gotti, could I say a few words?
Absolutely, Dottie.
And I want to also reiterate what everyone else has said, Mike. Appreciate your service to the town. You've been such a great support to the town clerk's office, and one of so busy over the many years with the many elections and just offering your support. And it's truly appreciated, and you will be missed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dottie.
Okay. Chris, any other business that has come before us?
No, Mr. Chair.
I would look to see, are there any questions from the public or press? You can put something into the Q&A or raise your hand. Seeing none, I would
There's
There's one, Mr. Chairman.
oh,
One just came in.
One just came in. Okay. This is from Kathy Sullivan, 283 Farm Lane. Where do the cars ultimately get parked, and is there a limit as to how many cars can be valeted? Nora, are you still on? I believe these.
I am.
Yeah.
So there is no limit on how many cars can be valeted. Right now, the cars are being parked behind the steeple building in the 52 spaces that are allocated for that reason. If they decide that they have a need for more spaces than can be accommodated on their property, they can make arrangements with other property owners to park in spaces that are otherwise not used. So there are other properties in the area that have additional parking that's not used during those hours. And I believe Mr. DeSaro has been working with some of those property owners to see if he could work out some agreement. But for right now, the cars are being parked on the steeple property, and there's more than a sufficient number of spaces to meet the needs.
Okay. If there are no other questions, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn the select board meeting of April 26, 2023.
Marianne, before you second that, there is one other comment from John Cummings, 4 Chickadee Lane. Thank you, Michael, for your 9 years, especially for your work on the Islington Task Force.
Thank you, and thank you, John, and I hope to be enjoying some of the fruits of that at some point.
Okay, Marianne, if you would like to second Michael's motion of adjournment. Okay, roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. See everybody Monday night at town meeting. And our next meeting will be Monday, May 8th at 6 p.m. via remote participation. So that will be the next meeting, and hope to see a great turnout on Monday night. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night.